Yeah, I'd like to call the Finance Committee meeting to get it to order for November 22, 2022. It's now 5 minutes after 3 o'clock, and welcome everybody. This meeting is being held via Zoom pursuant to Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021 is extended. This meeting is being conducted by a remote means. Members of the public who wish to access the meeting may do so via Zoom or by telephone. There's no in-person attendance of members of the public, but every effort is being made to assure that the public can adequately access these proceedings in real time by technological means. Also, want to remind everybody that this meeting is being recorded. So that should be reflected. So I'm going to go through the members of the committee and make sure that members of the committee who are present who do constitute a quorum can hear me and be heard. Kathy?
Yes, here.
Lynn?
Present.
Michelle?
Present.
Bob?
Here.
Matt?
Present.
Okay, so there are presently four council members and 2 resident members present, and that constitutes a quorum. So we can keep going, and we will confirm other people as that they can participate as they join the meeting. Since we know that Bernie's trying to get in, and we're expecting Michelle in a little bit of time. The agenda for today's meeting, after call to order, is to review the agenda. And so we were going to spend a couple of minutes reviewing the forum of last night. I did take some notes. I'm going to wait for Bernie to get back because Bernie's the one member of the committee who was not there last night. So he may need the review more than anybody else. We will have public comment later in the meeting. The principal topic is the FY24 budget guidelines. We have may want to discuss whether we need an additional meeting to deal with the guidelines and other issues coming forward. Approval of minutes. I have one set of minutes to submit to you for approval. And then under items not anticipated by the chair 48 hours in advance, we might want to take a couple minutes. Bernie, hi, can you hear? Bernie, try again, as we didn't hear you. You're muted at the moment.
Here we go. I'm completely faded, so it's
Yes.
consistent.
Uh,
I'm present.
You're present in the cloud, but you're present.
Yes. Some people may have noticed I've been in a fog lately, so it's now literal. So
Okay. We were just reviewing the agenda. It called the meeting to order, and we're reviewing the agenda is all that I've done so far. And I was saying that we might take a couple minutes to talk about one additional item. All counselors have received a memorandum from the superintendent of schools, the athletic director, and I sent copies to the resident members prior to the meeting so that all members would have a copy of that very brief memo that he sent. And it follows last night's meeting and the vote that took place in last night's meeting. One of our members, Michelle, has suggested that we need to talk about whether we should be getting that onto a future agenda for the committee. And so I want to recognize her request by adding that as an unanticipated agenda item. So I don't know if anybody else has anything unanticipated. I said that I had taken notes last night. So the first item was if there's any comments about the public forum section of last night's meeting. And just for Bernie's sake, he was the one person who was not present. I think we had 19 people who spoke to the committee. 6 of them were teachers and paralegals who spoke about the salary negotiations and the need for funds to assist in dealing with the dilemma that they're in. And the comments were fairly consistent with what we heard at the night of the financial indicators meeting. We had 3 people who were talking about climate action and were requesting an additional staff position, suggesting that given the extent of the climate action plan, that just having Stephanie as the Ticcarello as the only staff person was not sufficient staffing. So that was what 3 comments were about. There were 7 people who were commenting in sub form with some differences in emphasis, but talking about Crest's desire to get it to 24-hour coverage, the question about the BIPOC Cultural Center and Victim Compensation Fund, cutting the police department. That combination fit into 7 of the comments that we received. We had, and by the way, some people covered more topics and bridged into other things, saying, oh, and we also support the teachers or things like that. So it wasn't exactly clean. We had a couple of people who raised other issues. One was that we need more staff at town hall to assist getting things done, including the strategic partnership agreement. So that kind of was the summary of what we heard. And I don't know if there's anybody from the committee who has any comments about the forum part of last night's meeting and what we might want to take from that as we go forward and talk about the guidelines. Okay, seeing no requests then, I sent you yesterday a piece that I did, which what I did was I went through the guidelines for the current year, FY23, and I tried to go through and identify issues that sort of popped out at me as I was thinking about, gee, if I was going to take the guidelines and modify the general format but make them applicable for this year, what are the kinds of things we need to talk about? And that was the list that I have sent to everybody who's present, because it went to the entire finance committee group, which includes our staff. So I wanted to at least start the discussion by finding out whether there were additional issues that people would like to add, or whether they think that they would amend or delete anything from the list, because my list was to start a discussion and not to be the discussion. So let me pause, and Michelle, saw your hand pop first.
Thanks, Andy. The only one that, and I'm sorry, there's a little noise in the background. The only one that I didn't see on here that stood out to me was the reparations commitment, which I know we have some criteria on regarding the health of our, financial situation year to year, but I would like for it to be in the guidelines. And I'm not sure if this was a list of everything that would be in the guidelines, or if you were just sort of pulling out highlights. So I just wanted to make sure that makes its way into the guidelines.
Okay, good, got it. If it was in last year's guidelines and I could have missed it because it was issues to talk about, but I think it's important to add. Thank you, Bob.
Yeah, I just, a couple of things. I'm not sure that they couldn't be woven into some of the other discussions, but the first thing is, I think we're getting to the point now where we're going to have to start, the council's going to have to start making some real difficult choices. I don't see how with 8% inflation and 8%, health insurance inflation every year, I don't see how 2.5% is going to get us to where we want to be. And maybe we can get other sources of revenue, but I'm very concerned. And now Kathy raised this issue a couple of years ago. We're getting to that point in FY 24-25 where we're going to really start seeing stress on the budgets. And I think that it would be important for us to identify that. The second thing I wanted to say is, based on what I heard last night, I think maybe we've done a disservice to the town in terms of where we've kind of talked about how strong our financial position is and how great we've been in managing things. And don't get me wrong, we have been very good in managing things, but I think we're almost giving the residents a false sense of security in that, we got all these stabilization funds, we got all this, and we can really do other things. We just have to do it. And the reality is, most of these funds are there for a specific purpose and not really fungible into other things. So again, I'm not sure we want to pull this out as a separate thing, but I do worry that we're not communicating to the town how tight the budgets really are going forward. Thanks.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I do think that where you're, some of those comments, and then I'm going to go on, is when I talked about under numbers, I think it's 4 and 5, revenue and expenditure plans should be viewed in a multi-year context, in particular, and the effect of one-time funding and how we're dealing with that. But I think that this whole, what you're suggesting is a larger aerial view of the budget to include in what our report, what the guidelines are, and that they fit together. Bernie?
Thanks, Andy. The list that you generated was very comprehensive, and I just would note that the reparations commitment was in the letter that we sent last year, but not a separate. I'm forgetting which section it was in, but there we certainly have, the committee certainly hasn't forgotten about the reparations. I just want to echo some concerns. I think, Bob's statements are well taken. And we always start with some kind of disclaimer that this is going to be a horrible year, and then we go on and tell everybody how much more we're going to do. I think at this point, we need to say this far and no further, that we're going to forego any new efforts, anything that hasn't been we haven't currently actually started, until we can get some clarity on the major building projects, our revenue stream. I get concerned, I understand the desire for a cultural center, but the budget that was proposed for one is fiction. And, here again, it's another program expansion. We have 4 new firefighters we have to support. We have the CREST program, and we need to look carefully at what the staffing needs of that program really is. And how much it's returning in terms of its value. That's going to take another year to do that. So my concern is that we just simply draw a line and we say we're going to just take care of what's on our plate right now. And we will have other surprises coming up, I'm sure. So nothing new for the next fiscal year. The other thing I'd wonder about is if we need to have some kind of equity statement in the guidelines, or some kind of statement that points out that when salaries are considered based on the job description and the department the person works in, and what the prevailing wages are for that particular position. It's not just this town, it's every town I've been in. People will come in and say, well, the cops make so much, how come the teachers can't make this? Or how come, the teachers make this much, how come the highway guys can't make this much, and so on and so on. We have, we go through, the town goes through great pains to kind of scale the positions and look at what's going on in terms of competing interests for that particular position. And I'm just would like to tamp down this tendency to pit one group of employees against another in terms of what they make. And so those are my concerns. But otherwise, Andy, I think your discussion topics were right on point.
The last one is interesting. Kathy?
I completely agree with what both Bob and Bernie just said. And I think, in looking at the list is fine, but I think this is a document that is a communication document. It's not just, it's guidelines, but it's like, where are we and where are we going? So I think these kinds of things should come really early, on whatever the logical order is of the rest of it, because and including what Bernie just referenced is we're under market pressure across the board on wages and salaries. It's and we are likely needing to take a look at where we stand relative to, last night I was kind of shocked because it was all the East Coast towns, but to the surrounding marketplace. I mean, if you're living in Greenfield, you don't compare yourself to Wellesley usually. But just something that states it, because even with step increases, 2.5% is tough. If they're benefited jobs. So that kind of difficult choices, that this isn't mean-spirited. Then the other thing on CRESS, so Paul, I don't know how and when you'll be able to do this, but I think of CRESS is getting up and running. I've always thought personally we would be figuring out how to do peak load staffing, and we won't know what that is until we know what kinds of calls they can handle. And is that on weekends? Is that during the week? Is it ever happen in morning? I actually never envisioned 24/7 unless it turns out that's needed, but some sense of a timeline that after 6 months, after 9 months, after 12 months, we'll have, and I'd just like to put a couple words in here, is when we'll have a better sense of how it interacts with the workload of the police, and the staffing level that we're paying for. So Bernie's like, let's assess what we've got. So it's somewhere in this kind of mix. So that's just those pieces. And then the other thing we did here, since other than the schools, everybody, and the library, Paul, everybody works for you. We heard one strong request that there should be a 2-person sustainability department from the public. And I think we just need an assessment. I know at one point you used some grant funds to fund 3 years worth of a housing person to help with all the housing projects we had, because they were all coming on at once and it stretched the existing staff. So the encouraging, Andy, you don't quite have it in a bullet, encouraging what I think our town manager has always done, creative approaches to filling gaps where we have staff gaps, where we have a series of things we know we want to do over the next 12 months. And I have no way of judging anybody's workloads. I mean, I don't want people leaving because the only way they can get their job done is evening and weekend hours in addition to full-time jobs. So just something about I see it as a box, 2.5%. And today's paper talked about what that translates and in terms of housing. And of course, they right away showed Northampton's, on what's happening to our tax base, that we don't have a big tax base to spread everything. So just it's a tone of the document, Andy, that I'm looking at, on an introduction statement and an end rather than each of these pieces. So that's it. We had a whole section last time on pilot and either getting it in strategic partnership or going for legislation at the state level to get us some revenue resources from some of the wealthy institutions that are here. So I want to keep that part of the document, and I'll stop. It's, I just feel like we're never going to grow ourselves out of the box we're in a year's time. Period. No, it's a tone and messaging. That's it.
Paul?
Thank you. Sorry about the delay. So first, I was thinking the same thing during our presentation that you were, Bob, in terms of like what we've always said about the strength of the town, and but we didn't put in this sort of enough of the caveats that we feel that we all recognize, but we didn't do that very publicly. I think that's something we can improve on. Because that article was wrong. They're going to put a correction in the increase. It's under $400. It's not $800. So
it's already been corrected too, Paul. It's in the Gazette online article's been corrected.
It's in the print edition, but they're going to put a correction in the print edition tomorrow as well, and not just in the correction. It's going to do a small article. In terms of, we looked at the CSWG report as a sort of a starting point and a sort of a roadmap, but not as a Bible. And so I don't look at that as something we have to abide everything they recommend. In fact, I'm really relying on, in terms of the CREST program, just what you said, the experience. What are they going to look like? What are other communities doing in other, in other states? I mean, Earl reports that no department in any state goes past 10 p.m. So, the idea of 24/7, I mean, if he comes back and says, I really want 24/7, we would give that serious consideration. And then, what we heard last night are some, 3 different groups of people. We have not, we have not begun meeting with our department heads, and they have a sort of boatload of requests and needs as well. And if we're going to go, you saw the letter from the superintendent, like if we are going to be maintaining grass, we have to invest in grass, and that's going to be a significant investment. So all those things will come into play as we start to build the budget. So those are what to mention.
Okay. Lynn, just going to keep going around. When Alicia gets in, by the way, I think we're going to have to do a little bit of catching her up, because we've been talking about issues that we know she cares deeply about. But
I believe that Michelle had her hand up before I did.
Michelle, do you want to go first?
Sure. I really just wanted to build on what Paul was saying, and actually, Andy, what you just said, given Alicia's not here, and the CSWG report. Something I had in mind after we created a pretty hefty agenda, I think, for the DEI department at our meeting, not last night, but the previous meeting. There were a lot of items that we voted in that motion that seemed to require the expertise and the capacity and time and resources of the DEI department. And so this is more a question to Paul, or just a curiosity to put out there in terms of whether, especially given that both Pamela and Jennifer play a significant role as liaisons to those committees, and that takes a lot of time. I'm just wondering if we feel that the DEI department has the financial and resources otherwise to manage all of those items that I think have a 4-month window on them, at least for some reporting back. But just generally speaking, if that department feels it's a department of 2, and it seems like we're asking a lot of them. So I'm curious what your thoughts were on that.
So, thank you. So I was just at the Mass Managers Conference on Thursday and Friday. We have the largest DEI department in the state for towns that were at that conference. Everybody else has 1 person. So we have not gone through that the tick list, but I was comfortable with that list because it's stuff that we're already doing. Is already on our work plan, so I'm not too concerned about meeting that list. And so, in terms of, I think we can report back to the council successfully on things that we're able to accomplish and what we're not able to accomplish. So I think, these departments are operating technically legally under the town manager's instruction and direction, and they have a mission to complete certain things. And it's not just to manage committees. That's a piece of their job, but the committees are their own functions. They don't need staff there to do their work. So it's important for us to recognize what the role of committees are and what the role of our staff are. There's a difference between the two.
Andy, can I add to that real quick?
Sure.
And so this will be Pamela's first budget cycle. I've met with her to walk her through the process. As Paul said, department heads play a very large role in developing the budget. So I'm sure Pamela, I know for a fact, Pamela is identifying sort of, what she has currently for resources, what she thinks she will need for next year to accomplish the different goals that she's heard and what comes out in the from the town manager and the town council. And she'll have an opportunity to submit those for Paul's consideration. And so I would say there's different angles that come at it, but Pamela, I know, is thinking about it as well.
Yeah, and she and I met on that today, in fact. So she's thinking hard about that.
Lynn?
Thanks, Andy. I appreciate the cautions that people have put up, and they're real. They're really real. And the many other points that people have made. One of the things that I want to stress is that it's very easy to sit and advocate for a department that you work with, but what about the departments none of us are working with? The staffing needs in those departments. So it's, we hear about sustainability. Heaven knows I support the sustainability issue, but they have a committee, they're advocating for that committee. So as we look at staffing, it's staffing across the board. And my sense is, and this really goes back to what have we already committed to, and therefore what do we need to financially support? And that is where we need to put our money, is what we've committed to and we can financially support. We've done some amazing things in Amherst that no other town in Massachusetts our size is doing. And we need to make sure they're successful. So that does bring me to one question to Paul, and that is, in addition to the rolling out of CRESS and all the other things that go with it, have we in fact set up an evaluation of CRESS so that we have not just statistical feedback, but, evidentiary feedback. I can't say it. And really a way of looking at the comparison of what CRESS is doing and the way other operations like this are working in other cities and towns across the country that have them. I also, I do want to make sure that the pilot at the state level and strategic partnerships continues to be highlighted in here. This is something that Mindy Dom and Joe Comerford have committed to working on with us. And we need to get back to those discussions with them, because with UMass, it would be increasing pilots at the state level. With the strategic partnerships, those would be for the private institutions. So, and Paul, I have to just say thank you for being clear that recommendations do not become Bibles. They are, in fact, recommendations. We have more recommendations before us right now than we could ever fund in a million years. And we need to think strategically about what do we have to do and what is the role of town government.
I'm glad you brought that up, because when I was putting together the list, I was thinking first of all about number 2, as it's on the list, which is the majority of the community values current services, get an extra word in there, but that observation about current services and the whole range of current services. And then towards the end, new expenditures should be consistent with council goals and goals for the town manager. I sort of have been thinking about those two together, because the management goal, one of the management goals always is keep the town running well, essentially, and which is what it goes along with taxpayers valuing what the town provides. And so in some ways, those two pieces are an important core. Matt?
I meant to make a note on number 2 there, Andy. I would say that talking to folks around town and traveling around town, current services, level services, in my opinion, roads and sidewalks, we do need to invest more in roads and sidewalks. And I really don't talk to many people who are happy with the current level of services there. And that's no reflection on the staff, but I would suggest that that's an area of displeasure among most residents of the town.
So, I guess I wasn't thinking of capital when I was doing that, but that's a valid point, because I think that there are a lot in roads and sidewalks has probably been the leader all continuously, because it's what people use every day, and given New England weather, it continues to decay as you try and fix it. So it's a never-ending goal. Paul?
Oh, I just want to mention, Lynn mentioned about evaluation of CREST program. Yes, we have a manager who under grant funded who's helping us develop both a database, and everything is more complicated than you think, because does the database address HIPAA things, or we going to try to get the one for the fire department, all those types of things. So they're working through all of those details. They're hoping to go live on January 7th, and then in terms of responding to actual calls, they have a sort of a bunch of individual interactions that have been informative. But yes, we want to be able to evaluate the results of that program.
Red, your hand is still up. I don't know if that was from before. Lynn?
Matt, I assume your comment on sidewalks also includes roads, because I hear it. I don't hear them ever decoupled. I just keep hearing them, period. And then Andy, I do want to talk a little bit about capital, the other capital, not just the 4 major projects of capital, but we have sustainability goals that helps dictate some of what we should be looking at in capital purchases. We do have the 4 major projects. We do have the 5-year capital plan. And as we do all of that, I think it's important that we not lose sight of the need to build that into the annual budget. So that, you know, the 10.5 sounds great, but I'm going to go back to roads and sidewalks. There are people in Amherst who will say that is the 5th capital project. And that's what they would like to see improved, and so forth. So the issue of capital comes up for me. So finally, in that area, we are sitting on some pretty dilapidated buildings that either we need to figure out how we're going to demolish, repurpose, reuse, or sell. And you're going to hear this with me with the town manager's goals as well. Perhaps it's time that a group of people look at what are we going to do with the town's properties that are vacant and not being utilized, and deal with the tug that we're going to hear, and that is you should never give up a piece of town property because you never know when you might need it, versus yes, sometimes maintenance is not our highest priority. So that's one piece in that. And then on the other capital front, and that is we are on the verge, we hope, of doing some major new buildings. And we have some existing buildings that we treasure, like Town Hall. And are we building into our budgets enough to maintain those so that we're not looking at serious additional problems with those buildings down the road? You know, for instance, we're going to put a new roof on the police department. I think maybe we have already. Are we getting there? And then we say we're going to put solar on it. That's great. You know, but how are we going to deal with the ongoing maintenance and upkeep of existing buildings and new buildings? And then also the buildings we're no longer occupying, including ones we anticipate not occupying in the future, such as the one elementary school.
GOL had that discussion. Is that what I understand?
Which discussion, Andy?
About excess buildings and we're
No, we didn't have that discussion. I fully support everything Lynn just said, but GOL did not have.
okay. I just was curious whether it was going to be built into council goals, because I don't want to repeat council goals, but I want to incorporate council goals that come so that I bring the two processes together is the way I've been handling it. There was I don't know if you've talked about this in whatever group has discussed it, but the select board, as we were tailing out of business as a select board, had developed a policy on excess buildings, and a staff committee that was assigned to evaluating buildings and proposing what to do with surplus property, and a whole procedure for disposal of surplus property. I don't know if anything has come of that since the select board adopted it. I don't know if Sean or Paul have thoughts, response.
Yes, so that policy and that committee still exists. It just hasn't been a priority for that group to get together and start to dispose of properties. The only property is on Strong Street that they've been exploring for affordable housing. They haven't looked at the other properties, the properties with buildings at this point in time, but they can.
I mean, I can find that and send it to the finance committee. The Dave Zomack gets a lot of credit for doing a lot of work to help the select board to develop that policy. Lynn, back to you. Since
Nope, I'm done for the moment.
okay, then I guess Kathy.
Bob was before me.
I'm just going on the order of my list on the right.
No,
Bob?
sorry.
Yeah, I just want to build on what Lynn said. I totally agree that we need to really look at all capital projects. And we started an inventory. And I would like to see the town build up that inventory so that we cover all of the capital issues. Because quite frankly, I don't have a good sense of what our capital commitments are, maintenance commitments are for the next 10 years. I think we need to know that. And the inventory is one way, it's not the only way, but it's one way to kind of like put everything out there to say, yeah, we need a new roof on every building every 25 years. That means 25 years from now, we're going to hit with, whatever, $500,000 cost to replace the roof. I think that would be great if we had it. I know people are strapped for time and all that, but I think as we look at each individual property, or as we, do different efforts to look at capital, I think we should fold that information into the inventory so that we're capturing it and we're getting it all together in one place.
Would it be unreasonable to put that into the guidelines along the lines of pointing out that the charter provides that the council will give guidance on inventory, and would that be a way to tie it all together?
Yeah, I think so.
Matt?
Oh, I think Kathy and Lynn were before me.
I think they've spoken. I never know who his hands up is.
Yeah, no, I had my hand up. I was just waiting to come after Bob. So,
Okay.
and, I was following up on what Lynn was saying about property. And Andy, you said select board set up something. There is a staff committee. When I think of it, and I don't know whether it has a part in guidelines, I wrote this in my manager evaluation too, that I think it's a bigger process. So some of these, we might want to just sell them for money and turn them into property tax paying entities. And I've watched several towns recently create ad hoc kinds of committees where it had staff on it, but it was a get input on possible uses and then come back and make a decision about it. And the timing of that, so I don't know whether that's in this 12-month period. Well, if the school vote goes one way, we will have one more large property. We already have Hickory Ridge. Now, I'm not talking about disposing of it, but it's got a 7-acre potentially developable piece. So I'm concerned that we don't immediately jump into something that doesn't produce revenue for us, as opposed to, I totally support affordable housing, but if some of these projects were at just the 10% level and they had a few other things. So I have ideas around this, but I don't know whether it could be in guidelines because we have quite a few. We have the South Amherst School. We have the one on Strong Street. I don't have any idea whether the Hitchcock Center, since it's on conservation land, once it's gone, it's scheduled for demolition, whether that, but I just a collection of it to give a sense that it's not just going to lay dormant till 10 years from now. We remember that we've got these pieces of property. So it's a liability until we turn it into an asset. So somewhere, whether it's in this document or some other place, I think we need to put it on the radar screen because people notice that we've got things just lying fallow, and why aren't we using them? That's just a piece on what you said, Lynn. I want to just build on it, but I don't know whether it's this document that we're talking about. That's it.
Okay. As I said, I will look for and send you the policy. it is a policy of the town because it has never been amended or repealed by the council. And I'm not sure that as a counselor that I would recommend we do that. But I think it's important to we all be aware of it.
I can send it out to everybody, Andy.
Okay, appreciate it. Matt?
Lynn, if you're going to talk about capital, please go ahead before me.
Yeah, I am. And I just want to recognize that we have some good building blocks, because I want to recognize the work that Sean and the staff have already done to really begin a proper inventory. I want to recognize the fact that we have hired a person who has been really terrific at assessing our buildings and determining what can be done for them. So this is not as if I don't want this to sound in any way at all as if it's critical of what has been done and the
Right.
move that we've already taken. So I just want to say that we need to keep building on that in a much more aggressive, maybe way.
Yeah,
Thank
and I
you.
just want to point out, I didn't intend to be critical either. I was just pointing out that we needed to expand this, keep building on what we've built before.
Matt?
So, Andy, I wanted to kind of go in a little different direction. So I don't know, Sean, I wanted to talk a little bit about families and first-time home buyers and sort of connecting some of the economic vitality. I'm looking at last year's budget book and the town council goals, and I'm just reflecting on, the decision last night with the track and, some of the big school decisions that are currently being made. And then I was looking at some of my notes from last year about the elementary schools, and I know that school enrollment is not an exact proxy for young families, but it's a pretty good one. And over 20 years, elementary school enrollment went from 1,500 range to 1,000 range. So that's a 33% drop in elementary age school enrollment in the schools. And I know that's choice and charter and other factors are involved there, but I think it's safe to say that the young family population has dwindled. And when I think about what I like living in Amherst, really I point to the Kendrick Park project first and foremost as like the most positive and honestly net budget neutral pretty much for the town. It was a really wonderful project that was put on. But I would just like to propose that we and I realize we don't have free funds to allocate towards first-time homebuyer projects and things like that, but I would like to at least sort of articulate a value and a need for the governance of this town to try to incentivize and just make the town an attractive place for young families to live. And I mean, obviously I'm biased here in my my position, and everybody knows that, but as I've watched these debates go on and then seen some of the decisions that have come out, I really do I do question whether this is a town that truly prioritizes attracting and retaining young families as residents, and as homeowners. And this is actually the first time I thought of this was about a year ago, a comment that Irv Rhodes made around all the efforts we make towards affordable rental properties and how few efforts we make towards affordable first-time home purchases. And so, I realize that's kind of far afield from what we're talking about right now, but it's just something that's been on my mind as I've seen the tone and tenor of the past few weeks of debate within the town, and wanted to kind of put that on the record here. Thanks.
Okay, that's thank you. Sean?
Thanks, Eddie. I was just thinking you may want to go through the list and sort of put them in two buckets. Some of the things I've heard feel more like town manager goals than maybe budget guidelines. Like the inventory, I think, is a good one, but I don't know necessarily if that's a budget guideline or if that's something to build into the town manager's goals. So you may want to go through the list when you're done and think about which ones would be in which document. But I think they're all good. It's just where they belong.
Yes, and Michelle and I did talk about that a little bit before. I don't know how much we're going to be able to do of it, but we wanted to at least give some thought to how we make the two documents fit together. Because we certainly don't want them to be inconsistent, but we don't want them to be unnecessarily crossing paths and duplicating. So thank you. Lynn?
Yeah, I really want to just echo that because we did not even get to that conversation last night. And it's unclear how we're going to actually have that conversation in a timely way. And I think the Finance Committee brings a certain and important perspective to the realism of goals and what's realistically able to be done in any 1 year or 2 or 3 year period. We continue to kind of look at the goals as kind of multi-year. I think we also need to look at how we budget in the same kind of way. I mean, there's some of these projects would not be 1 year projects.
Okay, Michelle?
Lynn, I had thought to ask you this last night, but it was pretty late. Would having a meeting of the whole at the next GOL meeting on November 30th be one possibility for having the discussion, since we'll already be having it? And perhaps other counselors may be in the audience, but maybe suggesting that it could be a meeting of the whole, and we could have, I think I'm calling it the right thing, a committee of the whole or meeting of the whole. That would give us an opportunity, if a majority of counselors could be there, to have that discussion a bit before we get to the December 5th meeting, where we might want to start to get more concrete.
I need to unmute. Athena and I can quickly poll people. There are some people who just won't be able to attend that meeting because they work. And but it might be useful to get more counselors into that discussion on the 30th. Let me check that out.
Okay.
Okay, so this has been helpful to have the list. Let's step back for a second and talk about the process and get back to the timeline. Lynn, you're going to have to be helping with this. Our original goal was to have the draft ready for discussion on December 5th at the next meeting. We've got a lot of work to do, and if with the holiday, I won't really get to the draft before the weekend with a whole lot of time. And then the question is whether we need an additional meeting to discuss the draft, rather than try and just do it by people sending me comments, which then doesn't get any cross discussion. Given today's discussion, I'm a little bit concerned that that might not be the best way for this committee to proceed as a committee. Kathy?
I think we need another discussion. Andy, that's what I said last time, and I'll stay with that. You know, we made some substantive changes on the first draft last year. And it was a really good first draft, but we moved some things around, we changed some emphasis, and there's just no way of doing that with a track change document where we can't see each other and we can't talk with each other, because ideas bounced off people and they say, oh yeah, but put it here instead of there. So I don't see a way of just you drafting something and then us all sending you comments to get to a draft that we all feel like came out of our collective thinking. That's my view. I see Bob's nodding his head. I just think it's just because we can't, because of the prohibition of chit-chatting on the phone about something. That seems to be the only way we can do it, to actually meet. So I think we need another meeting.
We can do that. I probably would suggest that either with help, Lucina or Sean, or just by my going online, and doing a doodle poll might be the best way to schedule an additional meeting rather than trying to do it in a collective with everybody pulling out their calendar.
Andy, I would suggest that we make sure that Alicia can attend because she hasn't been here and she's an important voice we need to hear on this.
I know, I was thinking about that. Because I had been in communication with her about today's meeting a number of times. So something must have come up because I thought that she was going to be in by 3:30, but
My understanding is that she has actually changed when she has to work and is now working more afternoons or something like that. I'm not sure I completely understand, but something's changed in her schedule.
well, we need to try and reach out to her because I agree that she's an important member of the committee. And it's unfortunate. I had asked her about whether she had an order of agenda kind of recommendation.
So has Michelle left the meeting for the rest of the evening?
Yes, which is gonna, she said that she had to leave around 4.
Yeah, so when we met last time, I put a tentative hold on the 29th, Tuesday, the same as the
Right.
normal time. I just put because we talked about this, and so I just penciled it in, not knowing if that was the best date, Andy, but no one said no to that last time. And as Lynn said, Alicia's schedule, I don't actually know what her schedule was because she could make the Tuesday morning. This morning we met the school building committee, but she can't make Friday morning. So it seems like she's got different day constraints. But I had put a tentative hold on my calendar and I'll just keep it until someone tells me it's a different day.
Yeah. Athena?
Thanks, Andy. I just want to suggest that we put together some tentative dates and do a poll rather than discussing individual people's schedules while they're not here. I feel a little bit uncomfortable about doing
Yes.
that.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
If Andy and you and I work together on that, or if other members have suggestions for dates that might work, then we can do that offline. That's one of the things that we're allowed to do offline as administrative tasks.
I totally agree, Athena. And if you can get Alicia at least to say what times would work for her, so we have at least a slot that we know, because at this point I have no idea. I have partial knowledge.
We'll make sure to do that.
Yeah, that's for compliance with open meeting law. I think it really would be best if we had a full meeting over the draft so that public at least had the opportunity to see the draft and comment on the draft in our continued effort to be good models for how to run on open meetings.
Andy, just to clarify, so would the next meeting be to develop the draft?
Well, what I'm going to try and do is develop what we did last year, develop a first draft, which then, as Kathy pointed out, we did certain things. We moved some things around. We decided to create emphasis paragraphs with each section that would sort of summarize what the key points were of the section so that people could read it and, you know, delve in at various levels as they might be interested. I think those were the kinds of editorial things we did, and there may have been some substantive things we did also.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think it's easier for people to react to something and then beef it up from there. Yeah.
So I maybe let's see what your thoughts are as a group. It might be good to see if there's any desire now for any members of the public who are in the audience to see if there's public comment and get that in, and then come back to minutes and anything else that we need to talk about. So we just say that if you're in the public, currently as an attendee, and you would like to be recognized to offer public comment to the group, please raise your hand, because we will recognize you and bring you into the meeting. Okay, I see no requests, so at this point, I think that we're back to where we were. And I think that the other question that we're going to have to get to at some point is whether there's follow-up to last night's discussion, including the suggestions of the superintendent about issues that we need, that schools would like us to be thinking about. But I'm not sure that we want to make sure we get the guidelines done as our first goal. But that certainly comes in. And to some extent, it might be a piece of it, because addressing the recreation fields in and around the high school and community fields may be an issue that we need to at least put out there in the draft so that it can get council discussion. Bob?
Yeah, I just had a random thought, and that was that if it may have already been done, but it would be helpful for someone from DPW, I guess, to consult with other institutions like UMass that maintain grass fields as a, athletic fields as a part of what they do. Is there a special grass that they plant? Is there, other ways that they grade it so that it can be more easily drained of water? I mean, it might just be helpful to have some expertise that exists in the community, tap into that. That's all.
No, it's helpful.
Andy, can I respond to that real quick?
Yeah, I was thinking it was Dave.
Yeah, I mean, we do have somebody in the DPW who has sort of a turf management expertise. I think, again, I think some of it may be resources. I think, as you heard, a lot of it may be, just staffing and time. But again, I just want to emphasize a key piece of it is just the usage. And, it doesn't matter what you do, if there's limits on what type of pesticides you can use and what types of treatments you can apply. It doesn't matter what you have. But the one thing we do have is from that 2019 study. It does get into sort of the maintenance costs of fields and how much you should have set aside for maintenance of natural fields versus turf. But I can bring that back to DPW and see what they think.
Okay, thanks.
That was from the Recreation Area Working Group or whatever.
Yep.
The name of it. And that was, I think, staffed by Dave Zomack.
Yep.
Bernie?
Just an aside, UMass has a international reputation for its turf management program. We may actually want to, if we have some interest in that, we may actually want to see if the university would be interested in using our athletic fields to maintain and to practice. They have their research facilities out in Deerfield, and having something closer to home and might be helpful to them.
Okay. Other thoughts or topics? Let's okay. Going back to the agenda, I think that we don't need to try and prolong this meeting for the sake of prolonging the meeting, because we're going to schedule an extra meeting, and that might be the best way to handle it. I do want to suggest that I've reviewed one more set of minutes. So we're getting closer to the end, but we could go ahead and the changes to the June 7th draft, which you've previously seen that I suggested were very minor editorial things. They're, period, breaking some of those long phrases with lots of semicolons into separate sentences and things like that. There were no significant changes. So if somebody wants to make a motion to adopt the minutes of June 7, 2022, I think then we're down to 3. Lynn?
I'm more than willing to make that motion, but what is the status on September 13th, October 4, and October 18th?
They need review.
Okay,
And that's why I had hoped to do it, but there's so much that is happening within the past week that it just didn't
okay.
get done.
I just needed clarification. So I move that we approve the minutes from June 7th, 2022.
Is there a second? Kathy seconds. So we have a motion. We ready to vote?
Yes.
Seeing no hands. So I'll just go Kathy,
Yes,
me, yes, Lynn,
Yes,
Bernie,
Concur.
Bob,
I support.
and Matt.
Support.
So it's voting members.
you need to vote, Andy.
I did.
Oh, okay.
You did.
That makes it 3-0 with 2 absent and 3 in support. From the resident members. Any other business that people would like to raise today? Because if not, the next meeting will be as scheduled by the doodle, after we get the doodle poll done, and I'll work with Athena as quickly as possible to get that out. Appreciate quick responses, and I think otherwise we're adjourned. So I'll call the meeting adjourned at 10 minutes after 4, and thank you for a very efficient meeting.
Okay.
Well, have a good holiday.
Yeah, everyone have a good holiday.
Happy Thanksgiving, everyone.
Thanks.